Welcome to episode 30, Construction Nation. This is Sue Dyer, your host of Construction Dream Team, where I interview industry leaders and experts so you can learn about the people side of construction and build your construction dream team. Based on OPE, other people's experiences, the shortest way to success is to learn from others. So I hope that everyone will head on over to iTunes if you use an iPhone and give Construction Dream Team a 5-star rating, or subscribe as well. If you check it out on iTunes, there's a little purple icon that is your podcast icon. And if you push on that, you can search for Construction Dream Team. If you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see the stars. If you hit on the one the farthest to the right, it will give us a 5-star rating. This actually helps us with the search engine so more of Construction Nation can find us. So thanks for your help. So let's dive into today's episode. I am very excited to have Jeanne Kuttel here as our guest today. Jeanne is the Chief of the Division of Engineering for the California Department of Water Resources. She has a BS and an MS from UC Davis and is a licensed civil engineer. She's spent her entire career with DWR, and the last 6, she's been the Chief of the Division of Engineering. And many of you may remember there was a lot of news not that many years ago about the Oroville Dam, and Jeanne has been on top of that and has had an exemplar team working with her to fix some of the problems that were there, and she can tell us more about that. But I want to welcome you, Jeanne, to Construction Dream Team.
Thanks, Sue. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I know that you've had a journey. You've been at DWR. That's an interesting journey. So tell us a little bit about how you came to be kind of the head of engineering there.
Sure. I started, as you mentioned in the intro, with DWR pretty much straight out of school. So that was only 1 or 2 years ago. Ha ha ha. But Department of Water Resources has been a really amazing career spot for me. As an engineer, it has amazing projects. The department has lots of responsibilities, and it's kind of a multi-mission department. But my journey came in through engineering, and I was started as a designer and did a lot of different types of projects. And I had the opportunity to work on some unique restoration projects early in my career. I think from there, I focused much more on project delivery. And as a state of California, we traditionally do design, bid, build. And so that's where most of my forte is. And then the complexities of the projects, particularly in water, and I think that's probably the case more broadly in this day and age relative to, say, 40 or 50 years ago, with the environmental permitting and cost sharing and partnerships and things like that, I became a little bit more focused on less on design, but more on just overall project delivery and building good teams for project development and ultimately design and construction. And so I did that for a number of years and had the opportunity to work throughout our department for many different clients within water resources in partnerships with federal government, the Corps of Engineers, and the Bureau of Reclamation. And then I was selected about 6 years ago to lead the Division of Engineering, and that's been a very challenging but rewarding job. I have about 350 staff that report to me, and it's not just in design services, but design and construction, as well as real estate and surveying, and then contracting as well. So that's kind of how I got here.
That's really interesting. So tell us a little bit more about the California Department of Water Resources, and maybe a kind of an overview of what their global look is these days, because water is so much in the news. I'm sure everyone is interested in knowing, what do you see on the horizon, or what are you guys already embarking on?
Sure. Yeah, it's our department is very diverse and has a lot of amazing opportunities. So, and typical with water, you either have too much or too little, it seems these days, and particularly with climate change, it seems like that's going to be more the norm than the exception to the rule. So our department for the state of California is responsible for overseeing all water resource functions. The biggest responsibilities that we have is in operations, maintenance, design, and construction of the state water project. And that's one of the largest state or government-owned water facilities in the world. I think China now has, with their Three Gorges project, a larger system. And of course, the federal government has the Central Valley project, also here in California. But the state water project is immense. It starts up near Oroville and through natural channels, gets through the Delta, the San Joaquin, Sacramento Delta, and then through the California Aqueduct, all the way down to Southern California, and provides water to farmers and municipalities throughout the state. And so that whole infrastructure is something that the DWR folks work on in many different facets. The complexities of getting water in and out of the Delta with fishery-related issues has been challenging. And so there's a group of scientists that work on water resource compliance activities with fisheries and the biologists. And then we have a flood control component. So we partner often with the Corps of Engineers on flood control projects. And that's the levee system in the state of California. And then we also are involved with drought. When we have drought, we're participating in drought activities, as well as preventing flooding activities, which is usually happening a year or two after a drought. So we also recently have been involved with groundwater management, and that's as a result of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that was signed a few years ago by Governor Brown, and that's to help get the groundwater basins kind of balanced and into check. So that's in general. We also do Division of Safety of Dams oversees all of the jurisdictional dams in the state, which is, I think, well over 1,200. So it's a very diverse department. Division of Engineering, we focus primarily on the design and construction and real property acquisition for any or all of those projects. So we get, our fingers are tied into all sorts of different, very unique and diverse projects. The bulk typically is tied to state water project facilities, but it depends. If we're in a prolonged drought, we've done a lot of drought work. If we are in flooding, we'll have more flood work tied to repairing our levee systems. So it's a very diverse and very interesting field to be in.
Yes, it sounds so all-encompassing and, so important, because the water is so important to both the economy and the people, but also it's a big political issue always too. So it's a very dramatic, dynamic process, and you're right in the middle of it all. So it's pretty exciting.
Indeed, yeah.
And I want to congratulate you and your team for winning the International Partnering Institute Partner Project of the Year Award for the Oroville Dam Spillway. And so tell us, that was dramatic. I mean, it was on the news all over the world as we had so much water coming, and it kind of spilled over the spillway. So tell us a little bit about that project and kind of what you did to fix this in a really remarkable way.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and we are very proud of the work that DWR did with a fleet of partners and consultants in repairing the spillway. So going back to 2017, it was February 7th, and we'd had, again, after 4 or 5 years of prolonged drought, we had some pretty significant rainfall in December and January. And starting into February, we were actually utilizing the spillway. Oroville's about an hour and a half north of Sacramento, and it's the tallest earth-fill dam in the United States. So it's a big monster up there. But the spillway that we call the flood control outlet, or the concrete spillway, has been used roughly about on average, half the numbers of years that the dam and its spillway have been in existence. They were completed in the late 60s. And I think on average, were used about 25, 26 times, something like that. So it wasn't that unusual for the spillway to have to be used, but what was unusual is that it appeared that there was an anomaly in the flow pattern. So when we shut off the flow on February 7th, there was a pretty large crater in the middle of the spillway. And at that point, the predictions were that the basin was going to get significant rain over the course of that week. So DWR, in partnership with Cal OES and many others, stood up incident command teams, and we called those the response teams. And so they were managing the spillway operations and everything that was happening up there with an awful lot of rain coming and a lot of challenges to the infrastructure. I was involved at that point at the department level, helping to manage not just Oroville, but we also had flooding throughout the state. So I was out in Sacramento at the Cal OES offices, serving as the department operations chief for our department operations center. And of course, Oroville was big in the news and internationally as well. But it was shortly thereafter that, in my role as chief of division of engineering with the folks who do design and construction contracting, the realization was there that however the spillway would be left when we got into the summer season, we would have a very short period of time in which to make any needed repairs to have a functioning spillway again by the following winter season. So I started and kicked off a team, and we brought in people from all over, had to call people back from vacation in Disneyland and vacation in Hawaii. But we built this team very expeditiously. We were required by our regulators to have independent consultants review our work. We partnered with the Corps of Engineers and Bureau of Reclamations and many of our consulting partners and stood up a design team. And we put together a plan in the matter of about a month. And then we also knew we needed a construction contractor on board soon to be able to work with us in facilitating a repair, a pretty significant repair. And so we put out a set of plans and specs for bid with some pre-qualified contractors, and Kiewit Infrastructure was the low bid contractor for that particular bid package. And so we brought them on by about April. So if you remember, February was the incident. So within about 2 months, we had that contract. And at this point, there was still water going over the spillway. So we were still doing analysis and trying to evaluate the geology and all of these things, but yet we still had Kiewit on board. So by mid-May, we had hydrology was playing nice at that point in time, and we were able to shut the spillway off for what was the last time for this season to give the spillway in its state at that point, which was had some pretty big gouges and rock erosion, over to Kiewit to start to demolish the rest of the spillway. So in 2017, folks worked essentially 24/7 with setting up and mobilizing 2 batch plants on site. We had also our regulators. We had formal facilitated partnering, and our partnering at the executive level was meeting every 2 weeks to go over risks and challenges and look for opportunities and to address any challenges or issues that we had. So it was a very fast-moving project. The team was absolutely spectacular. And despite a lot of challenges, including things like hurricanes and other parts of the country that had impacts on our products or different staff that were coming in, we were able to complete our work for the 2017 season on the deadline, which was November 1st at 10 a.m. that same day. So we had just a few hours to spare in our challenge. And then we did take time to celebrate, but we didn't rest on our laurels because we had as much, if not more, work to complete in the 2018 season. And we knew that during the winter, the spillway would be unavailable to us because we needed to have it ready in case we actually had the hydrology to actually exercise it. So in in the winter months, we worked as a team and came up with improvements to mix designs and practices and polished a lot of our processes so that when in the spring of 2018, we started all over again and had another sprint to the finish and completed the vast majority of the project by November of 2018. So it was a sight to behold.
Yes, that is a significant effort and to be congratulated for sure. I thought it was, it happened fast, you put together the team fast, you hit the deadlines. I also thought it was interesting that you took the off time to polish, to make improvements, to capture lessons learned. And I think it's so easy to not do that, especially when you've been working 24/7, everyone's tired. But really, that's the time when you can make those incremental improvements that can really make all the difference ultimately in the project. So hats
Absolutely.
off.
And I think, we definitely realized a lot of those improvements. It made it a little less painful in 2018 to have had that opportunity to plan that we didn't have afforded us in 2017.
And I also know that you have started a partnering steering committee about the same time. And can you tell us more about why you started this and kind of how it works and how it has helped?
Sure. So for most of 2017, I sort of abandoned my quote unquote day job, my normal job as chief of division of engineering. I had an acting, and I was working exclusively on Orville as running the program. But prior to the Orville incident, I was working and was developing plans within Division of Engineering and in concert with our Division of Operations and Maintenance, who also will put out state contract act contracts, to develop and found a really robust partnering program following Caltrans is one of our kind of guides, following IPI and some of the other amazing owners that are out there that tout the importance of having strong partnering programs. And so, especially because we were seeing the successes in Orville and how those relationship building partnerships were really benefiting the project, as I was segueing my way back towards the latter part of 2017, we took the plunge and started a steering committee inviting some of DWR's kind of tried and true contractors that work on a variety of our projects. And for me, it was twofold. I wanted to get and I guess better understand the perspective of industry to make sure that we had a pulse on our construction contractors and how things were in industry. And I also wanted to change the culture internally within DWR and in particularly DOE and in our O&M division to let folks really understand that this was something that I supported and that I believed in, and that it was an opportunity that I thought would help make everybody's life a little easier in actually having advocates for the project. And so the steering committee stood up and we created a charter for that group and some kind of ground rules on how often we would meet and what the terms of our engagement would be, so to speak. But we also then set some objectives as far as wanting to have some field guide and rewards and look at metrics and things like that. So it's been a kind of a commitment on DWR's part to staff and work and build the program and keep it caring and nurturing it. And in return, the contractors that participate are sharing their insights, are helping guide and gaining a better relationship with our department, understanding where we're coming from. So it overall has been a really great experience. So I think we've met now at least about 6 or 7 times over the last couple of years, and we're continuing to set new objectives and new challenges for that committee.
So I just wanted to ask you, from the head of an organization that's working in the public sector, do you find the steering committee to be one where you feel like you're getting an ROI on it, a pretty good ROI on it, or is it too soon to tell?
Oh, no, I think we, despite as busy as all of us are who participate on the committee, for sure, the fact that we met all of our objectives, which had some very specific deliverables, I think shows that it's been a very effective use of everybody's time. And I think everyone feels like, because we've achieved our goals, that it really has been worth the effort.
Cool. And I understand that part of what you just said was an objective was to create a partnering field guide, and that's just been released. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So with the field guide, what has that been for your organization? I know it was an objective, and tell us a little bit about the guide.
Sure. The field guide was one of the deliverables from the steering committee. And essentially, we had been using and kind of borrowing some of the Caltrans standard specifications, but we are Department of Water Resources. We are not Caltrans. And so we wanted and felt it was important to highlight and have our own specifications and have our own kind of, documentation for what we expected out of our partnering program. So it's pretty straightforward. I think we use a lot of great resources, but it just kind of articulates the department's way of doing it, which is mostly best practices. And when we launched the field guide, we also talked about how to train that amongst DWR staff, in particular those within Division of Engineering and our construction and design offices who do a lot of the project implementation. And then also getting the word out to partnering facilitators. So we did have a training a couple weeks ago, and that was to familiarize facilitators with our field guide, to kind of set a baseline of what we expected for our partnering. And then as part of the criteria when the department meets our threshold for partnering, at least the formal facilitated kind, and we do make a commitment to partner on all projects, even if it's not formal, that the staff and the contractor staff all have kind of a consistent playbook so that the facilitators are aware, our department as our owner is aware, and then also the construction contractors are aware. So that's kind of the basis for having that field guide. We've been really pretty vocal about the fact that it's always a work in progress. And so even though we've published it, we've already had a second version where we made some small, what we believe were improvements or added list different things that we found would be helpful and valuable. So while it's posted on the department's website, we are always seeking to improve that with input from others so that we can continue to make iterations that improve the overall program.
That's so cool. The other thing that just has always stood out to me is that you must be clairvoyant or just really, really, really smart, because it seems like you started the partnering steering committee and working towards your field guide and creating your environment of partnering internally and with the contractors, et cetera, about the same time that the Oroville Spillway-ish project sort of came to be. So tell me about how did partnering play, what part did partnering play in the Oroville Spillway Dam and its success? What, in your opinion, now after the fact?
The team itself was amazing, so I don't want to take anything away from that, but I do believe that the partnering, the commitment to partnering both on the department side and with Kiewit as our contractor, and also we partnered, I think it's pretty unique with our two regulatory agencies, the Division of Safety of Dams and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And they were active participants in our partnering sessions. And that was really important because under normal circumstances, design can make whatever recommendations, but it must be approved through those regulatory agencies before a contractor will actually implement. So there was definitely a stake that they had in the success of this project. And because it was so expedited that the normal reviews of 30 to 60 to 90 days were more like 8 to 12-hour type of reviews because things were just so fast-paced. So having a facilitator that helps keep people accountable, having the commitment by the regulatory agencies, DWR as the owner, and as with Kiewit as the contractor, really allowed us to focus on what was in the best interest of the project, and hence the public, the state of California citizens, which is ultimately who we as the department, as public servants, work for. So it did establish a lot of baseline protocols for communication and no surprises and openness and setting expectations on rules of engagement that, while it seems so elementary, it really did set a positive groundwork for a very successful project. So I don't know that I was that clairvoyant, but it ended up, the timing worked out really well. And I think it also somewhat selfishly helped me in furthering the partnering within the department, because it was the exposure for Oroville had a much broader cross-section of the department involved. And so people who maybe wouldn't have otherwise been involved in certain aspects of projects saw it in action and saw the effectiveness of the partnering program.
That's awesome. Also, it sounds like you learned some really important lessons learned, like because it was a fast-paced project, things that you were able to do. Do you have any lessons learned from that where you're going to be changing how you operate on some other projects based on what you've learned because of this in policies, practices, procedures?
The team itself was, again, I think pretty extraordinary. And a lot of the effort was tied to kind of forecasting potential challenges and issues and coming up with contingency plans, which I think in general people do to a certain degree on most projects, but because the schedule was so tight for this project, we had really zero room for error. And as I mentioned earlier, we finished the scope of the original project within 8 to 10 hours of our deadline. And so we knew that A, failure was not an option, and B, that we needed to have a robust suite of contingency plans and be ready for anything that could happen. And that was everything from, again, hurricanes in other parts of the state or other parts of the world. We had 3 forest fires or wildfires that occurred near the site that at one point in time had potential evacuations of the site. We had potential for equipment shutdown. So all of the lessons learned to me were tied more to looking at contingency planning and trying to be prepared for things that maybe otherwise we wouldn't have put the effort forth to be prepared for. So I think that's something that can be applied pretty much to every project. Of course, it kind of depends on what the important factors are for the project. But those are things that through our partnering frequency and the meetings that we had, we were reiterating continuously and really checking and balancing how we could work together to be successful and really leverage everyone's creativity as well.
That's awesome. Well, okay, so in your long career, I'm sure not everything went exactly as you had hoped it would. What is the biggest challenge you've ever faced in your career? Take us back to that worst moment and tell us what it was and what you did.
I've been thinking about this one. There's probably more than one, but I would say for sure the biggest challenge was tied to Oroville because we had such an immense lift. The challenge ahead of us was really significant. I think by the time Kiewit came on board, we still had a lot of challenges, but even understanding how we were going to put out contracts and what were the real objectives of what we were trying to achieve. Also in light of the fact that not only was Oroville happening, but throughout the state, we had a lot of other flooding. And so the challenges that were faced by the department as a whole, and in particular the staff within Division of Engineering, who we do emergency work like this frequently, but never to this magnitude. So it was daunting, just a lot of the challenges. And I have to say it was a very rewarding and kind of almost spiritual type experience in bringing together such an amazing team that was so committed to the work. And so the department, our consultants, like I mentioned, folks worked an immense amount of hours for a very extended period of time. People were working 15 to 18 hours on average, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 for months. And it's a real, I guess, testament to the commitment that a lot of the folks in state service have for the work that they're doing. So that in and of itself was what kind of lifted us up, because everyone was pulling, 150 to 200% and really giving their all. And so that kind of determination across the boundaries was what got people through. And it was at great personal sacrifice. In many cases, people relocated and didn't see their families for extended periods of time. I was lucky that I wasn't actually in Oroville full time, but many of the staff were there 3 to 4 days a week and would have maybe 2 days with their family at most over the course of a couple of weeks. And so many missed birthdays and anniversaries and summer ball games and everything else, but it truly was a testament. But that's probably the biggest challenge in my career, for sure.
I can see that. And things like that don't happen without a good leadership. And I want to congratulate you too. I was so excited to see you win the Chairman's Award at the International Partnering Institute. Very, very well deserved, and you are such a good leader.
Thank you.
So what do you think is your greatest strength as a leader?
Well, it's hard. I actually asked a few of my staff, like, tell me why you think I'm a good leader, or do you think I'm a good leader? And thankfully, I think they do. But one of the comments I got back that I think struck a chord with me, having been with the department for as long as I have, like I said, about 27 years, I've really worked through pretty much every problem, and I've had a really diverse variety of project experiences working for many different aspects, all within the water resources kind of umbrella, but on infrastructure and restoration and drought and flood. And so I've had a really a cool variety of projects that I've worked on. But because I've had that experience in my career, the folks that work for me appreciate that I can really relate to all the facets of the work that they may be experiencing. And because I've worked through those problems, I have, I think, a sense of compassion for the challenges that the projects bring, and then can help better lead and guide and provide advice and mentorship to the project delivery team. And folks, because of my background, say that they know I care, and that I'm good at conveying kind of the holistic view. So while I design, we're often down to the nuts and the bolts, almost literally and figuratively. But it's also important to have a kind of a more holistic or broader view. And a lot of the folks on my team said that that's what they appreciate in my leadership styles. I can provide detailed assessments, but I can also step back and provide a holistic view.
That's great. So that way you can help them no matter where they are, wherever they're stuck.
I hope.
So what do you think is the best advice that you have ever gotten?
Yeah, so I got this advice. It is sort of career related, and I still remember it to this day, and I share it with a lot of my staff, and I think it's pretty relevant to wherever anyone is in in a workforce environment, but and it's maybe a little more pertinent to me today as it was when it was given to me. But when I first started at Water Resources, I was kind of mentored by someone who had been here for a very long time. And the best piece of advice he gave me was to plan for your retirement. And so that was something as a very young 20-something, when I started having a paycheck, pretty substantial paycheck for the first time, he said, at some point in the future, you're going to want to retire, and you should make concerted efforts to plan for that retirement early and throughout your career. And so I've done that. And I think it's really good advice, especially as different people and challenges are occurring in our retirement systems throughout the workforce. But that's one that I think although it might be a little bit selfish, it really has some very important, valid points. So for folks that are out there, especially new folks who are kind of in the same position, it's making that investment in yourself so that you have options when you get to be old and seasoned and experienced like some of us.
Yes, and it's so easy to not do, and much easier to do it if you have a system or plan, or just make it important, like pay yourself first.
Right.
Yeah, that's great advice. What is your favorite piece of tech that you like to use that you find really helpful?
I am not a super techie person. I was debating whether it was just the good old cell phone, which I use out of necessity most of the time. I don't do a lot of social media or anything like that, but with the phone and texting, and just the apps and the communication, it now is pretty much a gotta have. The only other thing that I never thought would be that important, but I found it is having Bluetooth in my car so that I can actually use my phone while being safe. So those are the two tech things. I know it's not terribly exciting. It's pretty standard, but those are the things that I have come to appreciate more than I ever thought I would.
Yeah, I can hear you there because I feel the same way. So we always ask every guest to give us a gift, a resource that you would recommend that would help all of us to learn to be a better leader or lead our projects more effectively. So do you have a gift for us?
I do. It's a little self-serving, but I'm going to share it regardless. I was going to share the Oroville Spillways Fast Facts. It's a YouTube video produced by DWR fairly recently, and it really does have amazing video and photographs and information about the spillway. It quantifies things like the pounds of reinforcing steel used and the volume of concrete and things like that. And so it does a pretty amazing job at kind of depicting the project, the enormity in a very short video. So it's self-serving in that I definitely am proud of the work that we did. And I get a lot of folks who are curious about the project and its success and kind of its magnitude. And until you've actually seen some of the videos and seen, the level of work that was completed, it's a little hard to describe. This particular video goes from kind of when the spillway was damaged all the way to the first spill that we had in April of this past year in 2019. So we actually see the highlight, which is the spillway in use for the first time in 2 years after it's been reconstructed. So I was going to share that YouTube video with everybody. Again, a tiny bit self-serving, but hopefully everyone finds it as interesting and fascinating as we here at DWR do.
Oh, I think everyone's going to find it extremely fascinating. And we will put that in the show notes so everyone can find it. for episode number 30 for Jeanne Kuttel. So check that out, because a picture can't help but give us thousands, 10,000 words to understand more about what Jeanne's really talking about here today. So check out the video, go to constructiondreamteam.com and look for episode 30, and it will be in the show notes. So thank you for that, Jeanne. Really appreciate it. So how can Construction Nation get a hold of you? Now that everybody is going to want to come and work on your projects with you, how can they get a hold of you?
I have a LinkedIn account that for my job here at DWR. That's pretty much only way. I don't do Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Me personally, the Department of Water Resources does have a Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter. And so if you're interested in water resources and the work we do as a department, again, whether it's specific to design or construction, or you're more interested in water delivery or restoration, it's a great way to have a pulse on the variety of work that DWR does. But for me personally, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And
we'll put a link in the show notes for that as well. So do you have some parting advice for all of us? Something that we can maybe start doing tomorrow to get better based on all the great things in the years that you've spent in improving and learning how to lead your teams?
So for me, and it maybe ties into my other great advice or what people have told me in the past, retirement for many of us is way closer than I would have ever expected. And I'm taking a lot longer and harder look at succession planning and going out to others in high schools, in elementary schools, in colleges, and talking about the wonderful work we do as project delivery folks in whatever facet of infrastructure you're in. So I think my challenge to everybody is kind of figuring out who is your successor, your potential successor, and trying to start planning for teaching people and mentoring folks to take our places as we get older or decide to move on to newer and more exciting challenges. In some of the successes we've had here at DWR, I was able to step away from my existing position to go work on Orville because I had a very strong support and assistant chief that was in the wings to be able to do that. So I think it's important for all of us to have that be kind of more in our consciousness and use that. And so that's something I think everyone can start doing today or tomorrow, is having that internal conversation and looking around and highlighting which folks are out there that might be good candidates to mentor and take your place eventually.
I can't applaud that enough. I hear all the time in public organizations how they can't have succession, but I see all the time the top performing public entities all have a succession process that's bringing up people and teaching them and having them go through a system of chairs to learn so that they're ready should the opportunity present itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think this is a great episode, and I thank you so much, Jeanne, for coming and sharing about what you're doing with your partnering program, the wonderful work the team did and you did on the Orville Dam Spillway project, and just many of the lessons you've learned over these years working there at DWR. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome to. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for those that have listened. Hopefully my words of wisdom will be helpful to all.
I know they will be. So Construction Nation, remember, dream teams don't just happen. They are actually built one step at a time. So I hope that every one of our guests that has shared has put something, a gift to us, given us a gift. And we have put that all on our resource page at constructiondreamteam.com. So if you ever want to look at all of these resources that have been shared, please just head on over to constructiondreamteam.com/resources, and you'll find every recommendation that has been made so far. So they're all there. And it's quite a fun afternoon to just spend looking at. There's books and videos and YouTube and links and TED Talks. There's all sorts of things there that can maybe help you think maybe a little differently or learn something that you didn't yet know. So also remember that Construction Dream Team drops every Monday at 4 a.m. Pacific time. So please join me next week when I will interview another industry leader or expert about the people side of construction so you can learn how to build your construction dream team. Thank you, Jeanne, so much.
Thanks, Sue.
And thank you for joining us today. We will catch you next time.